Family, can I be real with you for a moment? So many of us are living beneath the life God designed for us, not because we don't have the talent, not because we don't have the opportunity, but because our mind has been hijacked. You see, the enemy doesn't have to take your destiny if he can take your thoughts. He doesn't have to rob your future if he can convince you to sabotage it yourself. But I came here today to tell somebody, you don't have to keep living as a prisoner to the lies in your head. Today, I want to teach you how to think correctly. Not just positive thinking, not just surface level affirmations, but a transformation in the way your mind processes life challenges and even yourself. Because if you can shift your thoughts, you can shift your world. Are you ready when we say your thoughts shape your reality? It is not just a phrase to inspire you. It is a principle that governs every human life, whether we recognize it or not. Everything that exists in your world right now first existed in your mind. The relationships you have, the career you are pursuing, the way you see yourself when you look in the mirror, all of it has been filtered through your thought life. Before anything ever becomes tangible, it starts in the invisible world of the mind. If you believe you are capable, your actions begin to align with that belief. If you believe you are unworthy, even blessings that come your way feel like mistakes, and you will unconsciously sabotage them because your reality will always bend to the truth of your thoughts. Consider the way a seed works. You plant it into the ground. You cannot see it anymore, but eventually it pushes through the soil and reveals what was hidden. Thoughts operate the same way. Every thought you allow to take root in your mind is a seed, and eventually that seed will break through into your reality. If you constantly think of lack, you will live as though resources are always scarce. If you meditate on fear, your choices will become smaller, safer, and restricted. If you dwell on possibilities and solutions, your creativity expands and opportunities begin to reveal themselves. The soil of your mind does not discriminate between good or bad seeds. Whatever you plant will grow. That is why two people can live through the same circumstances and produce completely different outcomes. One person sees a closed door and thinks, "This is the end of my journey." Another person sees the same closed door and thinks, "This is simply a redirection to a better path." The circumstances did not shape their outcome, their thoughts did. One spiraled into despair because of a thought, the other stepped into possibility because of a thought. The reality they lived was not defined by the external situation, but by the internal narrative that replayed in their minds. You have to recognize that your mind is not a passive observer of your life. It is an active architect. Every blueprint for your reality is drafted in your thought life first. If your mind is constantly occupied with self-doubt, you are drawing the blueprints of limitation. If your thoughts are aligned with faith, growth, and resilience, you are drawing the blueprints of expansion. Many people are frustrated with the house they are living in without realizing they are the ones who drafted the design. To change the house, you must first change the blueprint. Think about language for a moment. The words we speak are reflections of what we think. Words create atmosphere, they create energy, they create expectation. If someone wakes up in the morning and the first thought is, "This is going to be another hard day," then every inconvenience they face will confirm that thought. If the train is late, it validates the thought. If the email is heavy with demands, it validates the thought. Reality seems to be proving them right, but in truth, it was their thought that trained their mind to look for evidence of difficulty. In the same way, if another person wakes up and says, "Something good is waiting for me today," they begin scanning the day for evidence of good. The same train delay is seen as a chance to slow down. The same email becomes an opportunity to prove their strength. The same challenges are reframed as stepping stones. They find what they were thinking because reality is shaped by the lens of their thoughts. Science even supports this truth. Neurologists tell us about neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections. The more you think a certain way, the stronger those pathways become. Your brain literally builds roads for the traffic of your thoughts. That means if you constantly rehearse negativity, the road for negativity becomes a superhighway. It becomes easier and faster to think negatively because your brain is trained for it. But if you intentionally redirect your thoughts toward possibility, hope, gratitude, and faith, your brain starts building new roads. The more you travel those new roads, the smoother they become. And suddenly positivity is not just an effort, it becomes a natural pathway. Your thoughts are shaping the architecture of your brain, and by extension, the reality you live. History is full of examples of people whose realities were shaped not by what they had, but by how they thought. Inventors who created against impossible odds, leaders who rose from obscurity, survivors who turned pain into purpose. They all testify that the difference was not in their circumstances, but in their mindset. They refused to let external realities dictate their internal beliefs. Instead, they allowed their internal thoughts to shape the external world. And because they thought differently, they lived differently. Even in your personal life, you can trace patterns back to thoughts. Think about a time when you doubted yourself. Maybe you didn't apply for that job because the thought whispered, "You're not qualified." That one thought shaped your reality because you never gave yourself the chance. Or think of a time when you told yourself, "I can figure this out," and you surprised yourself with creativity and resourcefulness. Again, it was a thought that made the difference. Your thoughts set the boundaries of what is possible for you. They become the thermostat of your life. You cannot live consistently above the temperature your thoughts set. That is why protecting your mind is so critical. What you listen to, what you watch, who you surround yourself with, all of it is planting thoughts. If you are constantly consuming negativity, gossip, defeat, and fear, you are allowing seeds of destruction to grow. If you intentionally feed your mind with wisdom, hope, learning, and truth, you are sowing seeds of growth. Guarding your thoughts is not just about blocking out bad ideas. It is about intentionally cultivating the right ones. There are people who are living in the prison of their own mind right now. Chains of insecurity, bars of fear, ceilings of doubt. They are free in their body, but captive in their thoughts. And because the mind is bound, their reality reflects bondage. Yet freedom begins the moment you dare to think differently. The moment you challenge the lie and replace it with truth. The moment you catch the toxic thought and uproot it, you are reshaping your world. Your thoughts are not harmless background noise. They are powerful forces that set direction, determine focus, and create meaning. Every breakthrough begins with a thought that says, "It is possible." Every downfall begins with a thought that says, "It cannot be done." Your reality is the mirror image of the thoughts you repeatedly entertain. If you want to know what your future looks like, examine your thoughts today. Because whether you are conscious of it or not, the life you are living is already being scripted by the theater of your mind. For a mind revolution, you cannot live above the level of your mind because your life will always rise or fall to match the ceiling you have created in your thinking. A person can have incredible potential, untapped gifts, and divine opportunities waiting for them. But if their mindset is anchored in limitation, they will never step into the fullness of what is possible. The mind acts as a thermostat, setting the environment in which your life operates. If your mind is set low, you will unconsciously sabotage or downsize any experience that tries to rise above that level. If your mind is expanded, renewed, and elevated, your life will begin to stretch to match that expansion. This is why some people remain stuck in cycles of struggle, even when opportunities present themselves. If your thinking tells you that you are not qualified, you may decline an invitation that could have changed your life. If your thoughts are trapped in fear, you may stay in environments that are toxic simply because you cannot imagine life beyond them. On the other hand, when your mind begins to stretch into possibility, even the smallest opportunity can become the gateway to transformation. It is not the size of the opportunity that determines success, but the size of your mindset. Imagine someone living in a small room with the blinds closed. To them, that room becomes the entire world. They may decorate it, adjust the furniture, or clean it, but the size of their life remains limited to that space. The moment they open the blinds or step out into a larger environment, their perspective changes. They realize there is more, and once they see it, they can no longer be content with confinement. Your mind works the same way. If your mental window is closed, you only perceive life within the walls of what you already know and believe. Once you begin to expand your thoughts, you realize that what you once accepted as normal was only a fraction of what is available to you. Many people attempt to change their external world without first elevating their internal mindset. They switch jobs, move cities, start new relationships, or chase new goals. But eventually they encounter the same frustrations because they carried the same thought patterns with them. You cannot out-travel, out-earn, or outwork the limits of your mind. Until your thoughts shift, your reality will keep circling back to reflect what your mind has already decided. This is why generational cycles repeat. A family may pass down habits, beliefs, and limitations unconsciously through mindset. And unless someone decides to break the mental ceiling, the cycle continues. Even when we consider success, it is the mind that determines sustainability. There are people who rise quickly into positions of influence wealth, or recognition, but crumble under the weight of it because their mind never grew to match the level of their reality. Their thoughts still operated from insecurity, fear, or scarcity, so even though they reached new heights, they could not remain there. On the contrary, when a person deliberately trains their mind, challenges their beliefs, and stretches their thinking, they develop the capacity to not only reach new levels, but to remain and thrive in them. The outer life cannot consistently exceed the inner life. This truth explains why two individuals can be given the same resources yet produce completely different outcomes. One may use the resource as a stepping stone while the other wastes it or becomes overwhelmed. The difference is not in the resource itself, but in the mindset that interprets it. A resource placed in the hands of a limited mind becomes wasted potential, while the same resource in the hands of an expanded mind becomes multiplication. The level of the mind determines the level of the outcome. The way you perceive yourself also sets the level of your life. If you constantly see yourself as unworthy, inadequate, or incapable, no matter what you accomplish externally, you will find a way to disqualify yourself internally. You will shrink in conversations. You will decline opportunities. You will dismiss compliments, and you will deflect recognition because your inner ceiling does not allow you to rise. Conversely, if you see yourself as someone created with purpose, someone capable of growth, someone worthy of love and success, your actions begin to align with that vision. You speak differently, you walk differently, and you respond to challenges differently because your internal level allows you to reach higher. Every great transformation begins with a renewal of the mind. A person can be stuck in destructive habits for years until their thinking shifts. Once they begin to believe that change is possible, their actions start to follow. Their life elevates because their mind elevated first. The same is true in leadership, in relationships, in finances, and in personal growth. When you grow your mind, you grow your life. You cannot demand increase in your reality while your thoughts remain small. Think about how athletes train. They do not just prepare their bodies, they prepare their minds. A runner may have the physical strength to finish a marathon, but if their mind tells them to quit at mile 10, their body will obey. A weightlifter may have the muscle to lift heavier, but if their mind sets a limit, they will not push beyond it. The body submits to the level of the mind. In the same way, your life submits to the level of your thoughts. You may have more ability, more creativity, more resilience, and more resources than you realize, but until your mindset expands, those capacities remain dormant. Fear often disguises itself as wisdom in the mind. It convinces you that staying small is safe, that reaching higher is reckless, and that dreaming bigger is unrealistic. But what is really happening is that fear is setting the ceiling. It is dictating the level of your life by controlling the level of your mind. When you confront those fears and begin to think differently, you discover that the boundaries were never real. They were only mental constructs. The ceiling was not built by circumstances. It was built by thoughts. Faith, on the other hand, expands the mind. When you believe there is more, when you trust that growth is possible, when you dare to see yourself beyond your current situation, your thoughts lift the ceiling higher. And as your thoughts rise, your life begins to rise with them. Opportunities that once felt intimidating become manageable. Goals that once seemed impossible begin to feel attainable. Challenges that once felt like barriers become platforms for growth. The shift did not happen because the world around you changed. It happened because your mind rose to a new level. You cannot live beyond your mindset because your mindset is the lens that interprets every experience. If the lens is cloudy with doubt, everything you see will appear limited. If the lens is clear with vision, everything you see will hold potential. The same environment can look like a prison or a platform depending on the level of the mind. Reality is not just what happens to you. It is how you process what happens to you. That processing power belongs to your thoughts, and the higher you elevate them, the higher your life begins to climb. Wrong thinking produces cycles, while right thinking produces breakthroughs, because the quality of your thoughts determines whether you remain in repetitive patterns or step into new possibilities. A cycle is created when the same thought patterns lead to the same behaviors, which generate the same results, which reinforce the same beliefs, and the loop continues. Someone who constantly thinks they are unworthy of love will enter relationships that reflect that belief, endure treatment that matches that belief, and walk away with confirmation that they are unworthy. That cycle is not broken by changing partners alone. It is broken when the thought at the root is replaced with truth. Until the thought changes, the cycle remains. Cycles are exhausting because they give the illusion of movement without progress. You feel as though you are going somewhere, yet when you look up months or even years later, you find yourself in the same place emotionally, financially, spiritually, or mentally. It feels like walking on a treadmill. Energy is being spent, time is passing, but the destination does not change. At the heart of that treadmill is wrong thinking. If you think that nothing ever works out for you, your actions will reflect hopelessness. You may start a project, but you won't give it your full effort because you are already convinced it will fail. When it does not succeed, you take that as proof that your thought was correct, and the cycle tightens its grip. Right thinking, on the other hand, creates breakthroughs because it interrupts the loop and replaces it with a new trajectory. A breakthrough is when you break free from the limitations of a cycle and step into something that did not exist before. When a person begins to think, I am capable of change, even if the evidence of their past says otherwise, they shift their actions. They try again, they invest effort differently. They persevere with a new perspective. That change in action produces new results, and those results reinforce the new thought. What once seemed impossible becomes achievable, and the cycle of defeat gives way to a breakthrough of progress. Consider someone battling financial cycles. If their thoughts are trapped in scarcity, believing they will always be broke, they will spend impulsively, avoid learning about money, and dismiss opportunities for growth because they have already decided it will not work. That cycle of financial struggle keeps repeating. But if their thinking shifts towards stewardship, abundance, and possibility, their decisions change. They save differently, they learn differently, they seek opportunities differently, and soon the financial cycle begins to break. It was not just external resources that made the difference. It was the internal thought shift that birthed a breakthrough. Relationships reveal this principle clearly. A person who believes all people will abandon them may push others away before intimacy forms, misinterpret kindness as manipulation, or cling too tightly out of fear, creating the very abandonment they dread. Their wrong thinking produces cycles of broken connections. Another person who begins to think of themselves as worthy of healthy love starts to make different choices. They set boundaries. They walk away from toxicity. They embrace vulnerability with safe people. Suddenly, they experience breakthrough relationships that nurture instead of drain. The shift did not come from the world changing. It came from the mind changing. Wrong thinking often disguises itself as normal because it is familiar. People inherit ways of thinking from family, culture, and experiences. And those thoughts feel like truth because they have been rehearsed for so long. But familiarity does not make a thought correct. A person may grow up hearing that success is only for certain types of people, and they adopt that thinking as normal. Every time they approach a goal, that wrong thought pulls them back into a cycle of self-sabotage. Until they confront and replace that thought, the cycle will repeat. Right thinking challenges those inherited lies and replaces them with truth that creates new outcomes. The power of right thinking is not in ignoring reality, but in interpreting it differently. Wrong thinking magnifies obstacles until they feel like walls that cannot be moved. Right thinking acknowledges the obstacle but looks for solutions, lessons, and opportunities within it. Two people may face the same challenge, but the one with wrong thinking will see it as confirmation of defeat, while the one with right thinking will see it as a chance to innovate. That perspective produces different actions, and those actions produce different results. One person remains in the cycle of frustration, while the other steps into the breakthrough of growth. Cycles are not always obvious. Sometimes they show up subtly in attitudes, habits, or responses. A person who thinks they are always overlooked may approach opportunities with a defeated spirit, speak without conviction, or avoid taking initiative, which ensures they are indeed overlooked. They walk away confirming the cycle, not realizing that the wrong thought was shaping their behavior. When they begin to think differently, believing their presence matters, their voice carries weight, and their contributions have value, they act with confidence. That confidence shifts how others respond to them, and suddenly they are recognized. The cycle is broken because the thinking was corrected. Even faith demonstrates this truth. A person who thinks they are too broken for redemption will live in cycles of shame, hiding from grace and resisting transformation. But the moment they begin to think in alignment with truth, that they are loved, chosen, and capable of renewal, their posture toward life shifts. They pray differently, they forgive themselves, they step forward in hope, and those actions create a breakthrough from shame into freedom. The internal thought shift leads to external transformation. Cycles feed on repetition. They thrive when the same thought is entertained again and again until it becomes ingrained. Breakthroughs require interruption. That interruption begins with a single thought that dares to challenge the cycle. One idea, one new perspective, one reframing of truth can dismantle years of repetition. The mind that once thought, I can't, begins to whisper, what if I can? And that whisper grows louder until it becomes conviction. The moment conviction replaces doubt, the cycle begins to lose power and a breakthrough begins to form. Wrong thinking is comfortable because it demands no risk. Staying in the cycle feels safe because it is predictable. Right thinking demands courage because it stretches beyond what is known. To think differently is to open yourself to the possibility of failure, but also to the possibility of success. Breakthrough requires that risk because the comfort of a cycle is too costly. It costs time, it costs growth, it costs destiny. Choosing right thinking is not about positive illusions, but about aligning your mind with the truth that produces freedom instead of bondage. The evidence of cycles is frustration, repetition, and lack of progress. The evidence of breakthroughs is transformation, new opportunities, and forward momentum. The difference between the two is not chance. It is choice, the choice to continue feeding wrong thoughts or to begin cultivating right ones. Every person has the capacity to shift from cycles to breakthroughs by renewing their mind, challenging their beliefs, and aligning their thoughts with truth. Renewal of the mind is a daily discipline, not a one-time event, because the mind is constantly being influenced, shaped, and bombarded by thoughts, images, conversations, and experiences. Every day you are absorbing input, and that input either aligns with growth or pulls you back into patterns of limitation. If you treat renewal as something you did once in the past, you will find yourself slipping back into old habits of thought because the pull of negativity and fear is relentless. Discipline means making it a practice, a rhythm woven into the fabric of your life so that your mind remains sharp, clear, and aligned with truth. The human mind is like a garden. You cannot plant good seeds once and assume the garden will take care of itself. Weeds will still try to grow. Rain, wind, and changing seasons will still affect the soil. A garden flourishes only when it is tended daily, watering, pruning, pulling weeds, nurturing the soil. In the same way, renewing your mind requires daily attention. Thoughts of doubt, fear, comparison, or despair are like weeds that appear unexpectedly. If you do not deal with them, they spread quickly and overtake the garden of your mind. Renewal is the discipline of recognizing them early, uprooting them, and replanting what is life-giving. Many people misunderstand renewal. They think it means having one powerful moment of inspiration, one motivational talk, one encounter that changes everything permanently. While those moments can spark transformation, they are not enough to sustain it. Just as a single meal cannot nourish your body for a lifetime, a single thought of renewal cannot sustain your mind forever. You need consistent nourishment. The mind thrives on repetition, on reinforcement, on being reminded of truth over and over again until it becomes ingrained. Without that reinforcement, the old ways of thinking creep back in and reclaim their territory. Discipline means choosing renewal even when it feels unnecessary. Some days you may feel strong, confident, and aligned, but that does not mean you can skip the practice. Renewal is not just about repairing damage. It is about strengthening your resilience so you are prepared for what lies ahead. A soldier does not wait for the battle to start training. They prepare daily so that when conflict comes, they are ready. The same is true for the mind. You practice renewal every day so that when challenges arise, your thoughts are already trained to respond with clarity, courage, and faith. The daily nature of renewal also means you must be intentional about what you expose yourself to. Discipline is not only about removing toxic thoughts, but about guarding the gates of your mind. The conversations you entertain, the content you consume, the environments you inhabit, all of these feed your thoughts. If you are careless about your input, renewal becomes harder. If you are disciplined about your input, renewal becomes natural. Just as an athlete watches their diet not only during competition, but every day, a person committed to renewing their mind pays attention to their mental diet consistently. Renewal is also active, not passive. You cannot hope your thoughts will improve on their own. Left alone, the mind tends to wander into worry, comparison, or negativity. Renewal requires action, meditating on uplifting ideas, practicing gratitude, rehearsing affirmations, reflecting on lessons, replacing lies with truth. It is the act of catching a thought and redirecting it before it sets the tone for your day. This is why discipline matters. Without intentionality, the mind drifts back to familiar but destructive places. There is also humility in daily renewal. It acknowledges that no matter how wise, successful, or mature you become, your mind still needs tending. Pride says, I already know this, while discipline says, I must remind myself again. The greatest leaders, thinkers, and innovators in history practiced renewal by constantly learning, challenging their beliefs, and refreshing their perspective. They did not rely on yesterday's clarity to navigate today's challenges. They understood that each day required fresh vision, fresh thoughts, and fresh focus. Think about how technology updates work. A phone or computer may function well for a while, but eventually it slows down or becomes vulnerable without updates. Those updates are not one-time downloads. They are continual improvements designed to keep the system effective and secure. Your mind works in a similar way. Daily renewal is like downloading mental updates that strengthen your capacity, protect you from destructive thoughts, and keep you aligned with your purpose. Without those updates, you risk running on outdated patterns that cannot sustain the demands of your future. Renewal is not always dramatic. Often it is subtle. It might be pausing to shift your perspective when frustration rises, or choosing gratitude instead of complaint, or reminding yourself of your worth when insecurity whispers. These small acts, repeated daily, create powerful transformation over time. Just as muscles are built through consistent training, the mind is renewed through consistent choices. One small act may not feel significant in the moment, but over weeks and months, it rewires your thinking and reshapes your reality. Daily discipline also requires perseverance because renewal is not always easy. Some days you will feel resistant, other days you will feel tired, and there will be moments when the old patterns seem louder than the new. Discipline is what carries you through those moments. It is the commitment to keep showing up for your own mind, even when it feels inconvenient. Over time, the very act of showing up becomes a habit, and the discipline that once felt heavy becomes a lifestyle. There is also a communal dimension to renewal. Surrounding yourself with people who challenge, inspire, and uplift you makes the daily discipline easier. If the people closest to you are constantly feeding negativity, the burden of renewal becomes heavier. But if your environment supports growth, your discipline is reinforced. Community acts as accountability, reminding you to stay committed when you feel tempted to slip back into old ways of thinking. Ultimately, renewal as a daily discipline is about alignment. Each day presents new challenges, new distractions, and new opportunities. Without daily realignment, it is easy to drift. You may not notice the drift at first, but over time, even small deviations take you far off course. Renewal is the act of bringing your mind back into focus, recalibrating your perspective, and ensuring that your thoughts align with where you are called to go. It is a discipline that keeps you from drifting aimlessly and ensures that your energy is invested in the right direction. Daily renewal also expands your capacity. The more you practice it, the more resilient your mind becomes. Situations that once triggered anxiety or despair begin to feel manageable. Problems that once seemed overwhelming become opportunities to apply new ways of thinking. Each day of renewal builds a stronger foundation, and that foundation enables you to handle greater responsibilities, larger challenges, and bigger dreams. It is not about avoiding difficulty, but about training your mind to respond to difficulty with strength and wisdom. Renewal is a discipline because it requires consistency, but it is also a privilege because it gives you access to freedom. To wake up each day with the ability to reshape your thoughts, to refuse the lies of yesterday, to write a new narrative, that is empowerment. It is the recognition that while you cannot always control your circumstances, you can control the way you think about them. And when your mind is renewed daily, your life moves in alignment with that renewal. What you feed your mind will eventually feed your life because the thoughts that dominate your inner world inevitably shape the reality you live in. The mind is not an isolated chamber where ideas come and go without consequence. It is a fertile ground that receives every word, image, sound, and belief you allow into it. And over time, those inputs begin to grow. Just like the body responds to the food it consumes, becoming either strong or weak depending on the diet, the mind responds to the information and influences it consumes, shaping attitudes, emotions, decisions, and outcomes. If you constantly feed your mind negativity, your life will reflect discouragement, hopelessness, and stagnation. If you consume stories of failure, voices of doubt, and conversations full of fear, your thought patterns become conditioned to expect disappointment. You start interpreting opportunities as threats, setbacks as the end, and relationships as traps. Your life mirrors the diet of your mind because your actions are governed by the beliefs you have been feeding. The opposite is also true if you feed your mind inspiration, wisdom, truth, and vision. Your life reflects courage, hope, and forward movement. You begin to see opportunities where others see barriers. You interpret setbacks as lessons, and you engage with people from a place of confidence instead of insecurity. Feeding the mind is not only about what you intentionally study, but also about what you passively allow. Entertainment, conversations, music, social media, all of these are sources of input. Many people assume these influences are harmless, but over time they accumulate and shape subconscious beliefs. A steady diet of comparison on social media feeds insecurity. A constant stream of gossip feeds suspicion. A habit of consuming shallow or toxic entertainment feeds passivity and apathy. The mind cannot remain unaffected by what it repeatedly consumes, just as the body cannot remain unaffected by what it repeatedly eats. The principle of sowing and reaping applies here. Every thought is a seed, and every seed eventually produces fruit. If the seed is anger, resentment, or fear, the fruit will be conflict, bitterness, and anxiety. If the seed is love, gratitude, and faith, the fruit will be joy, peace, and resilience. Feeding your mind is the act of planting seeds daily. Some seeds take time to grow, but eventually they show up in your decisions, your habits, your words, and your relationships. The life you live today is, in many ways, the harvest of the seeds you planted in your thoughts yesterday. Think about the way elite athletes train. They are careful not only about how they move their bodies, but also about how they feed their minds. Many of them visualize victory, study strategy, and guard against distractions. They understand that feeding their mind with doubt will undermine their physical performance, while feeding their mind with focus and confidence strengthens their ability to win. Life works the same way. You cannot expect to perform at a high level in your relationships, career, or purpose if you are feeding your mind a diet of doubt and distraction. What you feed your mind also affects your emotional state. A person who constantly consumes fearful news will live in anxiety, interpreting the world as dangerous and unpredictable. A person who feeds their mind with gratitude will cultivate peace even in turbulent circumstances because their focus is trained to notice blessings instead of threats. Emotions are not random. They are the result of mental focus, and focus is determined by what you feed your thoughts. If you want peace, joy, and strength, you must feed your mind with the ingredients that produce them. There is also a neurological basis for this principle. The brain is designed to reinforce what it repeatedly thinks about. Neural pathways become stronger with repetition, making certain thought patterns automatic. If you consistently feed your mind negativity, those pathways become highways and negativity becomes the default. If you consistently feed your mind positivity and growth, those pathways strengthen instead. The more you rehearse hope, courage, and possibility, the more natural they become. The mind adapts to its diet, and eventually it stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like instinct. Guarding what you feed your mind is an act of stewardship. Just as a farmer does not allow weeds to dominate his field, you cannot allow toxic input to dominate your thoughts. It requires discernment to ask, is this feeding me life or is it draining me? Is this content building my vision or eroding it? Is this conversation strengthening my faith or weakening it? Without those questions, the mind becomes cluttered with junk, and the life that results from it reflects confusion and chaos. With those questions, you begin to curate your mental diet, intentionally choosing what serves your growth and rejecting what starves it. Your circle of influence plays a major role in what you feed your mind. The people you spend time with plant seeds in your thoughts, whether you realize it or not. If they constantly complain, you begin to complain. If they constantly doubt, you begin to doubt. If they constantly dream, encourage and challenge you, your own thinking expands. Feeding your mind is not a solo task. It is shaped by the company you keep. Choosing environments that uplift, challenge, and inspire you is as important as choosing the books you read or the content you consume. Even silence and stillness are forms of feeding the mind. In a world of constant noise, silence allows your thoughts to settle and gives space for reflection and clarity. Many people avoid silence because it forces them to confront their inner dialogue. But embracing it allows you to recognize what you have been feeding your mind unconsciously. Once you recognize it, you can redirect it. Silence becomes a tool for detoxing the mind, clearing out the clutter, and making room for nourishment. The discipline of feeding your mind well also requires consistency. Just as one healthy meal does not make a strong body, one motivational podcast or one uplifting conversation does not build a renewed mind. It is the accumulation of consistent input that makes the difference. Daily reading, daily reflection, Daily exposure to truth and encouragement, these small acts repeated over time, become the mental diet that sustains a strong life. The same way junk food accumulates in the body to produce sickness, junk thoughts accumulate in the mind to produce dysfunction. But the same way clean eating restores the body, clean input restores the mind. When you feed your mind with purpose, you begin to live with purpose. Your actions start to align with your vision because your thoughts are filled with clarity. Your decisions become wiser because your mind has been trained to consider long-term growth over short-term gratification. Your relationships improve because your thoughts are not poisoned by insecurity or negativity. Every aspect of your life begins to elevate because the mind behind it is nourished. Feeding your mind is not just about improving your inner world, it is about transforming your outer world as well. The truth is, your mind will feed on whatever is available, whether good or bad. If you do not intentionally provide it with nourishing input, it will consume whatever surrounds it. Negativity, gossip, fear, distraction. That is why intentionality matters. By choosing carefully what you feed your mind, you choose carefully the life you will eventually live. Every book, every word, every image, every thought is a meal, and over time, the meals build the body of your reality. What you consume mentally today will shape the strength, resilience, and fruitfulness of your life tomorrow.